Live. We are live, and this is Senate Finance. And I am actually looking at the agenda for the week we come back, so let me get the right agenda. Committee, they keep moving times on us, but we are going to break for about a half hour at 2:30. They have now moved the kind of reception for former Pro Tem Tim Ash to then. And we'll take a break then. And then we will, I believe, be coming back. Yes, we will come back after that and work through a couple other things, trying to get bills wrapped up before we leave. When we come back, we are starting at 1:15 on Tuesday. So we can get things done. We had already set the agenda when they moved that joint hearing. So we're going to start at 1:15, get one thing done before we go to the joint hearing, and then come back. We have three gubernatorial appointments that have come to us. Two of them are Washington County, so I'm going to do those. I think, Ruth, one was Hartford. We didn't have anybody near, but I thought you might do that for us. And
Sure.
Faith will email them. We're again trying to get contact information. I know when they'll send that without our asking. Over. I think that's it for housekeeping. So we're going to move forward, and today we are back on electric cooperatives and property tax exemption from broadband infrastructure. We did hear from the PUC, and they basically said they didn't have an opinion, so we don't need to come in. Or they didn't need to come in, so I said I would do that. So we're going to start off with Rebecca Samaroff from the Department of Taxes.
Hi everyone, Rebecca Samaroff, Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Taxes. I'm here with you today because on account of school breaks, all of our heavy hitters in this area are off. So I'll just apologize in advance for not having like every answer at the ready, but I will energetically write them down and return with answers or shoot them to you guys if things come up that I can't answer. I think you've heard significant testimony from us already on this bill. So what I can say is that kind of like reiterating some things that, clear definitions are really, what we care about at Tax. And I think to many extents, this bill is great in that sense. Like the fact that the entity owning the infrastructure in this case is the trigger for taxability is really clean and clear for us to advise the listers and assessors across the state and valuation. And I assume that's very clear for the companies too. They know whether or not they're an electric co-op. We don't see the same bright line clarity in the language around the broadband infrastructure itself. And this is a concern that I'm sure folks coming up later on the testimony schedule could speak more to with their expertise. But I guess the complication we see is that moving forward, a co-op may use these same poles that they're putting up for broadband to carry electricity and then have taxable and exempt activity going on the same infrastructure. And that's when a situation would get hairy for a lister or an assessor to figure out, how to figure out the exempt value of poles, lines, et cetera, or like a pole that's holding both an exempt line and a taxable line. And I think that would be complicated for the companies themselves too. So I know that our legal counsel, Will Baker, is enthusiastically available to work with Abby thinking about some of these complications, if that's something you guys would be willing to let us dig into. And yeah, as I said, I think probably the folks coming up on the roster would have more to say about this. I could speak
Yeah,
to it.
this is not a bill I'm going to plan to get out because I understand Ways and Means already has a House bill that's headed our way. So we have some time to do the fine tuning on this. So any wording you can suggest, I think that's my concern, is making sure we don't have unanticipated consequences. Okay, Senator Bray, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Samroff. I have a quick, so if we, the lawyers will figure this out, but I mean, it's the notion if a new pole, for instance, were built that was used exclusively for broadband, then it's a bright enough line. But it's when a pole starts to share different types of services. My understanding so far has been that the broadband was going to be strung all on existing poles, but I should hear from utilities to be sure. I don't know if they're planning any new poles just to address broadband, but maybe maybe the language fix can be around this exclusivity notion or something.
Okay.
I don't know if that works from tax's point of view, like that sharpens up the line.
All right, Rebecca.
Well, to that, I would say that would definitely be, a sharper line if we know that there'll be, continued exclusive use. But I guess from my understanding, listening to other testimonies in this committee, it seems like these poles become kind of like Christmas trees for all sorts of stuff over time. And, additionally, we're working with some, an area of statute that's, kind of sadly a bit outdated in general. I think that would be our biggest, I wouldn't even call it a complaint, but a disappointment about this is that it's like nestled into a piece of statute that, in an area that could just use like a bunch of modernization in general. But I think, being able to anticipate future uses for these poles and make clarity around it now would be really a good idea. And I'll just say also, if I'd be interested to know if the committee already knows if they're going to be leaning more towards the House version of this bill versus this one.
We haven't even seen the House version. It's just that there is a bill on the same topic that we can decorate. So we don't have to get this one out. Senator Pearson.
Rebecca, help me understand. I probably just been zoning out when we've been having this testimony, but is the tax assessed only on the poles right now, or on the poles and on the wires or lines?
Currently, it's all of the above.
Okay.
And I'm trying to just scroll to find that line for you here. Yeah, I think it's like a nice tidy list. I'm sorry, I'm not finding it quickly, but like poles, lines, maybe I even jotted this down. Structures, poles, wires, substations might have been a word on this too, but yeah, like the whole skeleton of the system.
Because we are, I live here in Burlington, so BED, I believe, owns all the poles, but Comcast, and therefore BED is exempt, but Comcast strings on their own wire. So, and for that matter, so did Verizon back in the day. So we must be handling this. But the question I think I'm hearing you ask is, so in a sense, the lines is kind of straightforward because we deal with that. But what happens when you also need a new pole? Right. And that's your question, right?
Yeah. Or when these new poles that are being, built, presumably into new areas that haven't had them before, if that's the case, what happens when we start stringing taxable things on those poles too? Are we like prorating the property value of the pole? Like that would be a totally reasonable way to go, but it would be nice to have that laid out. So both the company and the assessors and listers.
Or maybe in this case, since our aim is broadband, we just talk about the lines and the poles stay under the old universe. I mean, I don't see a much scenario where they would put in a pole and only hit it with a fiber line, they're gonna probably also, anyway, okay, that's helpful.
Right,
Thank
yeah.
you. I appreciate the clarification.
And Rebecca, anything you could do to help us get some precise language would be much appreciated.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll volunteer to come back when you're looking at the two bills combined then.
Okay. If it's okay with Patricia and Barry, I'm gonna skip to Commissioner Tierney because she said she was very short and she's got another appointment coming up. So I thought I'd let her get her testimony on the record, and then we can, I have a feeling, get into the weeds with Washington Electric Co-op, or the brush, maybe it is. Okay, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. June Tierney for the record, Commissioner, Department of Public Service. I don't have a lot to say about this bill. I just wanted to put the department on record as supporting it. Had I known, like the PUC, I could simply say we don't have an opinion. I might have done that. But I think it's important for us to emphasize at the department that we are supportive of the work that the co-ops are doing in this direction. And by facilitating this bill, you are adding a tool to their toolbox that fits under the rubric of removing state barriers to broadband deployment. So in that spirit, I would urge you to either adopt this version or some future version of the bill. It's supportive of the direction we're taking with broadband deployment. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to go back to Patricia Richards and Barry Bernstein. I don't know if you have an order or. Oh, I liked your backdrop, Patty. It
You're
looks
very welcome.
familiar and relaxing. Where is it?
Yeah, I'm on the beach in Maine somewhere.
Ah,
Remember the name of the town, but I got to find that out.
She always travels that way. Every time you're with Patty, she's got a different great background.
I was saying this, it's been a year since I've been able to go anywhere.
Right.
I don't care. I just want to go somewhere. Ocean would be best.
I want
No,
to see.
Go ahead.
I want to see your hounds again. You used to have a great picture with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll put up the dogs. I think that's a much better picture.
It's also relaxing.
Yes.
I'm going to up my campaign to get a therapy dog in the State House when we get back.
How about some cats too? That would be nice too,
Here are 5 one-year-old husky, Siberian husky. I call them puppies, but they're sort of adults now. They're in training for our team, our domestic team.
They look a lot like Senator McDonald's cows in coloring.
They do.
Okay, it is obviously Friday afternoon.
Okay.
And the last day before break. So let's see if we can focus here. So I guess, Patty, the question I'm still not clear on. I think I understand you can borrow money more cheaply, and then you can string the poles and the wires and then lease it out to the co-ops. But if you have to pay property tax, then you lose, thus the co-ops lose the financial advantage of your low cost borrowing. What I'm not clear on, and I think Rebecca brought up, is, and I've talked to Barry, so I think I understand these would be new poles, not just stringing wire on your existing poles. But would anything, are you just going to string poles for broadband? Or are you going to be putting your electric wires on those poles? And then we get to Rebecca's. So what do we, because your wires are taxable, right?
Yes.
So what do we do about that?
So as we said in the last time we were together, and I'll reiterate this, we have no plans to change any of the electric infrastructures. What we are taxed on today in terms of poles, wires, substations would continue. The build out of fiber would, and WEC owns, it's all 100% of the poles in WEC service territory we own. So there's no sharing mechanism with Fairpoint or Consolidated. So it makes our business case a whole lot simpler. We will put the fiber on our electric poles, existing electric poles. So no change in tax to that pole.
Okay.
I think the question is, in the event we have a very old pole or one that's, it's reached the end of its useful life, we will do testing on the pole. If it needs to be replaced because the new infrastructure that we're hanging is going to make it, the pole won't handle any new infrastructure, then we would have to replace that individual pole. But we are not anticipating we're going to roll out for 800 miles of poles. There'll be an occasional change out of the poles based on the life of that asset. If the pole is no longer useful, that pole would be replaced accordingly.
And that'll be part of our, it's Barry Bernstein, that'll be part of our normal electric. The only issue at all would come in, and we're not really looking at addressing this other than of electrical. We may have to replace a 40-foot pole or 35-foot pole with a 45-foot pole, so we have enough space in the communication space to add the line. But we're really only asking for exemption on the actual fiber and any hardware that goes with that fiber. That's all. We're
Okay.
not trying to do anything we would do differently. And we have about 1,300 miles of line and poles. We have 25,000 poles, I think. And as Patty pointed out earlier in another discussion we had with other committees, we pay about $1.3 million in taxes on our poles and wires, and another 200,000 plus on our Coventry landfill project and our Wrightsville project, which are generation projects.
Okay, so if you had to put up a 45-foot pole in order to get the fiber on, you're presently paying taxes on a 35-foot pole. Would you want that new pole prorated?
I don't think so, Patty. I think it's the same thing with the fiber, that we not going to try to split the fiber because we're going to have such low use of it. No, I don't. Patty,
I have an opinion, Barry, if you want me to go.
Go ahead. You go. Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. I would like to make this as simple as possible and only apply the tax to the fiber line. Any pole upgrades we would do, I think the co-op should bear that as part of the electric side. And we can make this very simple. Fiber and any equipment related to that fiber is tax exempt. If we have to upgrade a pole, we will eat that and own that on our side. June, you okay with that?
I'm totally okay with it. I think that's that's what we're talking
I
about.
want you to say yes too.
Okay, because we were talking about stringing new poles, like you would be running poles up a road where you may not have electricity.
So, so the reality is there's very few places that would happen. I mean, that's going to be a onesie twosie kind of thing. To make this very simple so we don't have any confusion, infrastructure we own, because if we're going to string internet out there, we're going to bring electricity to the site too.
Okay, that's, I assumed you would, yeah.
So let's make this really very simple, no gray, black and white. Barry, you let me speak, so that was my opinion.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking, because that's how we've been under the impression on it. The only place that I would think that there would be any issue at all, if we have an off-grid member who does not get electricity from us, but it's in our territory, someone would have to string from where we are, and that would really be the CUD, and that would be under theirs. We wouldn't be doing it because we're only going to be taking care of electricity needs. I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. I agree with Patty. Anything that we're dealing with is going to be under the electrical stuff, and all we're looking for is the same thing the CUD would have, which is exemption on on the fiber and the hardware with the fiber. Let's be real clean. I know that we just talked with House Ways and Means. They asked the same question, and that's how they were going to deal with it.
Okay, and I think that's probably the bill we'll wait for. Senator Bray.
I think Senator McDonald's ahead of me, actually.
Okay, Senator McDonald. I can
Right.
think of at least one road in Orange County where they could use this.
If a home is off the grid, as was suggested, currently could not a homeowner install the poles themselves for fiber only and connect it to roadway and is that an option that's available?
Yes, and I think also probably the CUD or the internet service provider would make the arrangements with them, and if the owner wanted to put it up. I mean, with fiber, you're talking about a
Okay.
lot less strength of pole.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then the question would be moved about who owns the poles.
Yes, in that case, for sure. That's what
Yeah.
as I spoke, I came to the same conclusion you did, Mark. Thank you.
And should you choose to put the poles in? That is yet unanswered.
Yeah, I don't think-
would-
Go ahead, Patty.
I would say if, for whatever reason, if Washington Electric Co-op put those poles in, the poles are electric based. The fiber line is not electric based. That's the broadband project.
Well, if that's clear, then it's clear. Good.
Yes, I think it's clear. I think if somebody wanted poles for just fiber, they'd go to the CUD and have them do it, not us.
Get one of those line extension.
As long as it's clear, that's
All right,
on this one. Yeah.
but if they would like electricity, I know I tried to sell a property up in Orange where they were off the grid. They had telephone service, but no electric, no cable. So if you decide to extend your line up to those houses, then that would be an electric function and the cable could go on it.
It'd be
And
handled like
then-
any other extension.
Like any
electrical.
other one. Okay. All right, Senator Bray.
Hey, I think I have
and
the
Senator Hardy.
same question, but slightly expressed maybe a little differently, just to be sure. I think we're there, but if for some reason, you decided to bring fiber down a road, up a mountain, whatever, where there's no poles at all now. So you put in 3 and you just string the fiber. That's the only thing that ever happens. You're not asking, even though there's no electricity and you may not plan to put it on, you're saying you're going to have those taxed just as though they were carrying electricity.
Yep.
And only thing you're asking for on those poles, which are fiber only, would just be the value of the fiber investment.
Yep.
Got it.
But I just want to say that
No buts.
if, oh, go ahead. You go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make this crystal clear, black and white. So my answer is what Senator Bray just described. Yes, we would not, the poles would be electric based, the fiber tax exempt.
Got it. Thank you.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Patty and Barry, for making this very clear and easier. I appreciate it and enjoying the back and forth on the screen as it's happening.
It sounds like something that goes on in this committee.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Exactly.
I was just looking to see if we'd gotten a fiscal note on this bill yet, and I thought we had, but I can't find it. So this would change the fiscal note if we have gotten one, because it's
Yeah,
now.
I don't think we've gotten one.
Okay.
I
Okay.
haven't asked for one.
Okay. So whenever we do, we would get it would cost less.
Rebecca, did this discussion help you with your concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved Patty's response. That seems very straightforward to me.
Okay,
Yeah, and I'm not sure to the extent that like the same line can be used for 2 different things.
I think they may be thinking that they would use one line of the fiber for your smart meters perhaps, and then the rest,
That's right.
that would probably be part of your negotiation with the cable provider. You would, as part of the leasing, you would get to run your line or
I mean, the
your,
primary reason for the fiber is broadband. I'm just gonna be
Yep.
black and white on this.
Yep.
That's why we're doing it. There's no, I mean, Barry's gonna shoot me for this. The business case on the electric side is very hard to make. We're gonna try to make that for our borrowing, but the reason we're doing this is for broadband. We can use that pole to string both electric and fiber for broadband. The pole can has a dual purpose, a dual use, but the fiber line itself, we're doing it for the broadband.
okay.
Yeah, let me just say, with EC Fiber, which serves our southern part of our border, our southern towns, right now what they do is when they put the fiber on, they pay us an attachment fee and they string the fiber on our pole and use our poles. The benefit of, and they don't pay any taxes on that. The benefit of this is because we're going to be in the same situation, they're going to get savings from our long-term low interest money, which we're going to actually just pass on to them, and they're going to pass on to the customer. So that's, and this will expedite getting high-speed internet to 75% of our members who don't have it or are underserved many years ahead of when the CUDs will be able to do it on their own. So that's where we're coming from.
Okay, so you're saying you are going to actually borrow the money for the fiber cable,
That's right.
and that lower cost will be passed on to the CUDs, so they can string fiber at a lower cost by going through you, because it's going on your poles, than they could if they borrowed on their own. And I believe it was 1 point something versus 4 point something.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're going to be able to lease that fiber, which is called the middle fiber, so they can string the last mile at less than they can build that middle fiber themselves, as long as we have the property tax exemption.
okay. All right, Sandra Pearson, you had a question.
Yeah, but I see Rebecca has her hand up too, so maybe she wants to clarify.
Oh,
I actually just
Rebecca
wanted-
moved, okay.
Sorry, yeah. I just wanted to say that with the changing schedule, I actually have to hop off right now to participate in an interview panel, but I'm going to come back and watch afterwards and pick up any
Okay.
questions for tax. And yeah, I didn't mean to throw a hot potato there earlier talking about the line used for, multiple things, because I think just, deciding to exempt a line that has broadband on it would be.
That makes it
Right.
easy.
Yeah.
Okay,
So thanks so much. Good luck and have a good weekend,
Thank you.
everyone.
okay, Sandra Pearson.
I guess without Rebecca, I'll ask maybe Abby if she's listening, and also like to hear if Patty and Barry have any concerns. I think the way to do this and have integrity is to condition the tax exemption on the fact that you're working with a CUD who themselves would not have to pay property taxes if they were just doing it. And I wonder, because I guess I worry a little bit about sort of an equal taxation question, and I'm not a lawyer. Maybe people can help me understand that. But the guts of my question is, do you care if we say, as long as the co-op or others are facilitating fiber for a CUD or something, something that hinges it to the fact that the end user themselves would be tax exempt. That just sort of is more fair to me. And I'm wondering if anybody has thoughts or comments.
Abby's just popped up.
Let me just say that that's the way the language is in the House bill. I'll just say that.
I think that we would want to do a little tweak to that language to say if it's a private entity that is working in conjunction with a CUD, we'd want to allow them in as well. And there is a specific entity we have in mind who you probably are all familiar with, that Michael Birnbaum works with, that I think we can fit in private entities as long as they're working with the CUD. I think that gives us the catch-all if somebody like a Michael Birnbaum's company is coming through.
That's Valley Net or whatever.
No,
Care,
that's
Kingdom
Pear
Fiber.
King, yeah.
Fiber is one. Valley Net is who EC Fiber goes through.
Yeah.
So
Um,
if there was another entity like a Michael Birnbaum, we don't know. People could come at this from different places and be creative. We want to allow room for that, but as long as they're working in conjunction with the CUD, that gives us that insulation that it's a mission-driven, not-for-profit mentality that in the value is passed on to the membership. We're like WEC is not making any money on this. We're doing this just purely as a pass-through to do infrastructure. Somebody else can do it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Something along those lines is what I'm interested in. Thank you.
And
Okay.
I believe that is the language in the House does allow for that too, as long as there's a connection with the CUDs.
I have a question because I've gotten a little pushback. If someplace like Franklin Telephone or Waitsfield or Champlain Valley Telephone wanted to partner with you, would they be excluded from access? These are local, community-owned telephone companies.
Well, let me just address the Waitsfield because that's in our territory.
Yeah.
And they will be working with CV Fiber, and we will have to make some arrangement with them both ways because they have some fiber already strung that to some of our members where we're going to want to work out an agreement to be able to use that fiber to hook up our new smart meters, and it'll be vice versa. So it's they're all, we should mention them too because they will be part of the pie, our pie anyway.
Okay. As long as we aren't excluding.
Not at all. CV Fiber's already been in conversation with them, as have we, about where they're going to stop doing it, where we would do it to get some other of their customers on fiber because they just can't afford to do it at this point.
Okay. Senator McDonald and then Senator Bray.
Just, the phrase that it would be tax-free if it was connected to a CUD. Does this mean connected by contract, by lease, or as opposed to being connected with a screwdriver?
They're basically, they're tax-free because yes, I think the lease cost would still come into them. They wouldn't pay tax on the final mile.
So on WEC poles, if it was leased to a CUD, it would be tax exempt.
Yes.
Does the option under those circumstances be that WEC could own it or the CUD could own it, and that's open for you, the two parties, to negotiate who owns it?
I would say yes, because that's what we're doing. They own fiber.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the language in the bill is clear. I don't have a preference, just that it's clear.
I mean, for clarity, anything that we are borrowing money for from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, from our U.S. funds, they're going to require us that asset remains with WEC. So if we build it, I can't flip it and sell it to somebody. Our lender doesn't like that. They want to have the physical asset to back the loan.
Okay.
Excellent rationale. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Senator Bray.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Senator Cummings' question about Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom when you overlap with them. So, so that's a smaller local phone company. But what happens if we go to, you happen to be in an area where Consolidated would like to serve, but they don't have fiber? Would Consolidated be able to lease fiber from you? Maybe this is highly unlikely. I'm just trying to test where the boundaries are in what we're supporting. Back to Senator Cummings' question about how open and even-handed is it?
I think the connection there will be if the CUD, because there will be some areas that we'll have to deal with that. If that works for the CUD's plan, I think we're going to be neutral on that. That'll be up to the CUD because they're going to be the ones who are going to be dealing with fiber to the homes where they're not served now. Patty, you want to maybe add on that?
Yeah, I'd echo what Barry said. If it's Consolidated or any large for-profit company, they have to work in arrangement with the CUD. They have to reach some sort of understanding. And the CUD is the entity that we care about because they're the ones that are going to say, we want this to be as low priced as possible. And in exchange for that, then you get this access to a cheap fiber lease. If Consolidated doesn't want to do that, then I don't think, then they wouldn't get the MOU with the CUD and wouldn't have access.
Consolidated wouldn't own the fiber, right?
No, WECR will own the fiber. They'd
Okay.
have to have an MOU with the CUD under the CUD's terms to provide internet service.
Service over the fiber owned by the CUD strung on your poles.
Okay. And
Leased
then-
by the CUD from us.
Owned by, yes.
Exclusive
So,
lease,
They're leasing, that's right, they're leasing the fiber from WEC.
Right.
An
The CUD is
exclusive
leasing the
lease?
fiber.
so then another version of that same, I just want to make sure I can compare it to what would happen without your line, your fiber being available. If Consolidated decided to run fiber down a road, that would be entirely taxable infrastructure, poles and fiber, correct? Right. So maybe this is a hypothetical that won't happen, but I'm trying to think ahead to it. If they would end up in a certain way avoiding a tax or the expense of taxation on an asset that they're using, just because they're going through a CUD, maybe that's something we want, but it would be good to know that or see that could happen to us, I think, and sort out what the policy around that is.
I think that's true. I think the CUD basically, I think what we're looking at is if the CUD ran that line and was able to keep the low price to the end user, our owner member and their customer, then you want the property tax to go to it. If Consolidated was going to do it totally on their own without concurring with the CUD, I don't think it'd be good policy to pass that property tax savings on to it. But that's just my personal opinion on it.
But I think about it in the context of if we are leasing the space to the CUD, and the CUD is looking for somebody to provide that internet service, provider service to the customer. If ValleyNet or CV Fiber or somebody, whoever is going to do it the cheapest way, that's who's going to win. So if it's Consolidated, says I want to beat CV Fiber or somebody else is doing it for a not-for-profit basis, and if Consolidated would compete in that space, there's no reason for them not to get that. I don't think that's highly likely because Consolidated is looking at a different business model. But if they could, and they offer that low fee competing with all the not-for-profits, then, I mean, we're indifferent, the consumer wins.
Does the bill speak to how high or low fees are? I don't believe we can craft that. We can craft
I don't think that we
open
can.
access or no
Yeah.
open access,
Right.
but not the fees or what
Well,
the
I will
fees
just
may
say-
or may not be.
Yeah, Mark, I will say that in the House discussion, in the House Energy and Technology, and you'll have to look at the final bill because I haven't actually seen the final bill either. But they had a lot of discussion about this, wanting to make sure if it was using public benefit, tax exempt, that benefit got passed on in some way with to the bottom line of the end user and not the bottom line of Consolidated's profit margin. That's, I think, what the intent was at the House was. I don't know how they did that, but that's what the discussion that they had was.
Madam Chair, they figure out how to do that. We could start demanding the same thing of Comcast and those other places when we get.
I'm sure we
But
will.
that's
And we
another
will look
matter.
at how they did that when their bill comes over. Karen Horn has her hand up. And then we are moving. I want to make sure Karen gets a chance to testify, and then we can go back to questions. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this whole conversation gives us a lot of comfort, because I have to say that when we first mentioned this kind of tax exemption, some of our towns absolutely blanched, because a considerable amount of the property tax revenue comes from utilities. I did want to I think that all the clarifications and specificity that you're discussing is to the good. A lot of that is included in the House bill, and it actually says that new broadband infrastructure owned by, in that instance, an electric distribution utility leased to a communications union district or internet service provider working with a communications union district. So there has to be that connection. And then they actually specify the speeds that it needs to be capable of. And it needs to be constructed after July 1, which is in your legislation as well.
Okay. This is starting to feel an awful lot like how we've done the tax credits and a lot of the housing programs. It's creative and it involves a lot of parties, but hopefully it will work. Sandra Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Karen, you didn't speak directly to whether your members are supportive of this bill or this effort. In light of the fact that there would be property tax revenue loss for them, does the benefit of having the broadband access outweigh the loss in property tax revenue?
Well, they're not.
I did.
Go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I did provide some testimony to a memo to the committee. And what you really have here, a collision of VLCT values. We generally oppose property tax exemptions because the remaining taxpayers pick up that burden. On the other hand, we realize the absolute need to get broadband service everywhere in the state. I'm just going to mention that my neighbor to the south, my immediate neighbors on Champlain Valley Telecom, I'm not. We're both on Washington Electric. I can't wait for all this to happen because I'm in the office today because there isn't any internet at home today. But anyway, so really what we wanted to make sure that there was very clear parameters around any property tax exemption, that it was as narrowly focused as possible, and that actually that you put in a sunset date, so that would force the legislature in the future to revisit the whole issue and look at, is this effective? Is it working the way it needs to be? And sunsets tend to do that. I can see Barry groaning.
So, okay. Well, I'm interested in what Karen has to say right now because she's testifying, and I was specifically wanted to hear from the League of Cities and Towns and also the School Boards Association, because you will have the impact of the loss of revenue.
Right.
But, so with that narrow, if we're able to define it narrowly and have a sunset, you would be supportive. Is that what I'm hearing? I haven't had a chance to look at your written testimony.
Yes, and I think the whole conversation about it being the fiber and not the poles, particularly existing poles, that's very important and very encouraging.
Have you had a chance, or have you talked to the School Boards Association, or do you think it's worth getting them in here to get them on the record, or not? I know you sometimes work with them on issues like this.
We have not talked to the School Boards Association about this. The towns collect the education property tax, and the one thing we wanted to be sure of early on was that towns weren't on the hook for the education portion if there was an exemption over there, but that has been all taken care of. So
Right, because it's both kinds of property taxes that they would
Yes,
be exempt from.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's helpful.
This is only on, I don't think there'll be any decrease in present revenue. This will be when fiber is put on those poles, you just won't get additional tax, but you won't see a decrease. At least that's the way I'm understanding it.
Right, yeah, and that is also very important that that be clear. And I think it is at this point. Needs to be new construction.
Right.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for Karen? Other questions or comments?
I'd just say, I hope we can do this, and I'm glad the House is already looking at it. Seems like, in different, over the years, we've been sort of hedging around how do we really make sure it's the CUDs and our nonprofit folks. The big players have their own plenty of resources, and this sounds like a really good approach. And, I remember a few years ago, we heard the wisdom of asking our utilities, our electric utilities, to do this. And congrats to you guys for finding a way forward, and hopefully we can help.
Keep that going. All right, I've got Senator McDonald and then Senator Bray.
I don't expect an answer to the question, Madam Chair, but I put up the hypothetical. If there's a telephone company in East Overshoe that supplies, that has broadband service that's not fiber, is there any reason why what's proposed would not be available to the telephone company in East Overshoe to string fiber and then lease it to have it non-taxable, and then lease it to a CUD? So I don't expect an answer, but
Okay, I think for this particular purpose, they said that in order to get the loan that is the basis of all of that, the federal government requires that the co-ops maintain ownership. I don't think we'll ask, I don't know if it's
Madam
Abby
Chair,
or the drafter.
my question was only if you put up the same hardware as that a WEC might put up. If a private company were to put it up, should the policy be to treat that hardware the same if it's leased to a CUD? And I wasn't expecting to get an answer, but maybe
Okay.
we would think about it and discuss it at a future time.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment? I think that the House bill particularly talked about distribution utilities. So if you're talking about a phone company, it would have to be addressed some way in language. But and the other thing, just in terms of Karen Horn's wanting a sunset, we have to borrow this money for 35 years. So we're obligated to paying for it for 35 years. So if usually a sunset I don't know, if it's just a review, it's one thing to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we can't borrow this money and then have somebody say in 5 years they don't want to continue it, because it would kill us in terms of,
Yeah, and I can see where you can't get a mortgage if you can't lease the land for at least 100 years. They have to know you're going to be able to pay them back.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, Senator Bray.
So I'm just checking on process. I thought I heard Barry saying something about DUs generally, and when I put in this bill, it was available. It created the opportunity for cooperative utilities, not for all DUs. And I've heard that some people are saying, well, why not do it for all DUs? So I'm just wondering, one, how far we're thinking about extending the benefit, and two, are we going to edit and hold our own version of the bill or just rely on editing what comes from the House?
Yes.
Okay, because the minute you start dealing with this stuff, it gets very complicated. I don't want to rush it. And we have a lot broader scope to deal with than House Energy and Technology. So it would be my hope with this, and I know Senator Brock has a broadband bill and there's one in the House, not to rush and get one out over there, but to maintain the right. We can always vote one out if we feel ready.
Right.
Or we can wait for one to come to us and we can either edit it or we can strip it and replace it with our own and do a strike all. We've done both.
Okay.
I think
Thank
it's
you.
just making sure we have the time to do it, and we just have a much broader agenda to deal with. If
Sure.
this would probably be a good time to look at the proposal in the tax structure committee for doing away with the tax on phone poles, but I don't think Karen would like that.
Thank you.
But that is out there, and we are dealing with phone poles. So that's my intent. And I think today was definitely helpful in clarifying, at least in my mind, what WEC is envisioning. It is more limited in scope, and that usually makes things easier to do. We may have time for like one more question, and then that'll give us 3 or 4 minutes to click out of here. I believe, Faith, we're going to come back to the same spot. Okay, so we'll come back here at 3. Be here at 3. We've moved our 3:30 up. So we're going back to S60 when we return. That is one bill. There's nothing coming at us like this, I don't think. So we're going to see if we can get it out or not, or in some form. So we'll work our way through that one. So with that, we don't have any. Thank you, Patty, and thank you, Barry. And we will see everyone back here at 3. And I know I've got an email somewhere with the Zoom thing for this